I am Jack Carter, a lawyer who was once called the arbiter of justice because of my steadfastness and never giving in to the powerful who manipulate the law. Throughout my career, I have fought to bring justice for the vulnerable, but the price was a growing distance from my family, especially my wife, Taylor, and son, Lucas. I never expected that the very things I'd stood for become the reason why the whole world turns its back on you. It all started out as a normal morning, but in a split second, my life turned upside down. That day, I woke up with a start, breathing heavily as if I'd just woken up from a nightmare. The pungent smell of blood in the air made me nauseous. My hands were shaking, and when the dim light from the ceiling lamp fell on them, I realized they were covered in blood. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was going to burst. The room around me was eerily silent, but my head was in chaos with a series of questions. Where is this? What happened? I glanced around. It was a hotel room. The tables and chairs were overturned, the curtains were drawn, giving it a strange, claustrophobic feel. And then I saw him. A man sprawled on the floor, his head smashed, blood smeared across the carpet. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, as if still filled with terror. I recognized him. It was Judge Michael Carter, the man I had faced in the Medicorp case. He was the key to my case moving forward. The man I knew had taken money from the corporation to sabotage my efforts. But why was he lying dead here, in this room, with me? I staggered to my feet, my head pounding. Images flashed through my mind, but none of them fit into the reality before me. The last thing I remembered was being home, sitting at my desk, reading a lawsuit, and now, here I was, in this pitiful state. Instinctively, I reached into my pocket. There was a heavy wooden stick, covered in blood, the murder weapon. My eyes widened, and a feeling of horror rose up in me, choking me. No, I couldn't do this. I couldn't. But the evidence pointed to the opposite. I was a murderer. I stood still in the middle of the room, feeling as if everything around me was pressing down on me. Footsteps sounded in the distance, heavy, hurried. My head whipped toward the door. Red and blue lights flickered through the curtains. The shrill sound of police sirens signaled that this nightmare was becoming reality. "Freeze! Open the door now!" a stern voice shouted, snapping me out of my frozen state. For a split second, I wondered if I should run. But where? With blood on my hands and a dead body right in front of me, everything seemed perfectly arranged to push me into a corner. The door swung open. 3 police officers rushed into the room, guns raised, flashlight beams shining directly into my eyes. I instinctively raised my hands, blinded by the light. "Sit down! Hands on your head!" an officer shouted. I did so, my mind blank. Another officer quickly closed in on me, handcuffing me. The cold cuffs clamped tightly around my wrists, and I could tell this was no dream. As I was pulled to my feet, one of the cops glanced over the scene. "My God," he said, his eyes wide with horror at the sight of the body. "We have a murder here. Who is this guy?" "A judge," his colleague replied, his eyes never leaving the body. "Michael Carter." God, this is going to be a storm. I wanted to scream that I didn't do this, but they didn't give me the chance. "Jack Carter," an officer standing in front of me said, his voice full of authority, "you're under arrest for murder." I tried to find words to justify, to explain, but they all got stuck in my throat. I was led through the hotel corridor, the eyes of the staff and the surrounding guests following me, full of curiosity and horror. I felt like everything was crumbling right under my feet. As I was pushed into the back seat of the police car, I heard a whisper over the radio. "Judge Carter, the Medicorp case. This can't be a coincidence." The words stabbed me like a knife in the chest. Medicorp, the corporation I had spent my entire career fighting against. They had threatened me many times, but I never thought they would go this far. Sitting in the car, my mind was blank. I couldn't piece together what had happened, but deep down, I knew one thing. I had been set up, and the people behind it all could be the people I trusted the most. The police car sped off into the night, carrying me with it, a once glorified lawyer turned murderer. This nightmare, I promised myself, would not end here. I would find the truth, no matter the cost. Before everything fell apart, my life was a concert of power and success. I was Jack Carter, a lawyer known for his tireless ability to fight big cases against powerful corporations. Every morning, I walked into the office with a confident look on my face and a stack of thick documents under my arm. To the people, I was more than just a lawyer. I was a bringer of justice, the last hope for those trampled by greed and injustice. The biggest battle of my career was the lawsuit against Medicorp, the pharmaceutical giant. Medicorp had launched a heart drug that had caused hundreds of deaths. I will never forget the eyes of Gail Sosa, a mother who lost her 17-year-old daughter to the drug. She had wanted to cure her heart disease so she could pursue her dream of becoming a doctor, but instead, the drug had poisoned her body. Medicorp denied any responsibility, blamed the patients, and I knew I could not let this go. But for every victory in the courtroom, Taylor was a failure in our family life. My wife, Taylor, was a talented surgeon. We were the perfect couple, two people with a strong passion for saving lives. But I didn't realize that while I was fighting for justice, Taylor was fighting to keep our little family together. My son, Lucas, is the light of my life. He's smart, creative, and passionate about technology. But I missed out on Lucas's most important moments. His first science presentation, his school's robotics award, and the evenings when he just wanted his dad to be home. Instead, I buried myself in legal documents, thinking I had plenty of time to make amends. Taylor's complaints grew more and more heated, from mild to sarcastic to full-blown arguments. I often thought she didn't understand the pressure I was under. I was trying to save hundreds of families, thousands of lives. Wasn't that more important than dinners around the dinner table? But what I didn't realize was that while I was fighting the outside world, I was letting my own family slip away from me. The cracks in our family didn't stop with the arguments. There were moments of silence between Taylor and me, silences I couldn't break, like an invisible wall that kept everything apart. She would often look at me with a look of disappointment and distance, as if she wanted to say something but didn't want to say it anymore. I knew Taylor needed a husband, Lucas needed a father, but I tried to convince myself that everything could wait until the Medicorp lawsuit was over. But the lawsuit was more than just a legal battle. It became my own personal battle, a battle with a powerful corporation that would do anything to protect its interests. I received anonymous calls in the middle of the night. At first, I thought they were empty threats. But then, one morning, I walked out of my house to find my car covered in red paint, with the words scrawled across it, "Don't come any further." Taylor saw that, and for the first time, she truly lost her temper. Do you know what you're getting this family into? They're not just threatening you. They could be targeting Lucas, targeting me. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I also knew that Medicorp wouldn't stop at mere warnings. Not long after, I received an anonymous email with a series of photos of Taylor and Lucas, photos of them leaving school, walking in the park, a short message. Sometimes justice isn't worth losing your family. I realized that Medicorp didn't just want to destroy my career, they wanted to destroy my life. But I couldn't let myself stop. I believed that I could protect my family, that if I exposed the truth, they would lose the chance to get revenge. That was my biggest mistake. The pressures outside pushed my family further into the dark. Taylor became more distant. She spent more time at the hospital, rarely coming home for dinner with Lucas and me. Lucas, although still trying to be close to me, I noticed that his eyes were filled with more and more disappointment. "Dad, why are you never home when I need you?" Lucas's question was like a punch in the heart, but instead of answering, I just kept silent. Long nights in the office, I sat looking out the window, the city lights twinkling as if to remind me that I was losing something most precious. But I kept telling myself that after this lawsuit, everything would be okay. I would have time to fix everything, to start over. I was wrong. Little did I know that Medicorp had gone beyond threats. They were not just after me. They had infiltrated my life and even had a foot in my house without my knowledge. And by the time I realized it, it was too late to save my family and too late to save me. The cold sound of handcuffs clamped around my wrists as I was escorted out of the hotel room. A crowd of onlookers filled the hallway, staring at me with curious, judgmental eyes. I tried to find answers in my mind, trying to piece together the hazy memories, but the more I tried, the more hopeless I felt. They were accusing me of murder, and I had no way to prove that I was not the culprit. I was taken to the police station, where things only got worse. The investigators quickly asked me a series of questions, but I had no answers. Why are you there? What motive did you have to kill Judge Michael Carter? The sheriff's cold voice did not hide his suspicion. I knew that the Medicorp case was the reason I was in this situation. Judge Carter had ruled in favor of Medicorp many times, and I had criticized him publicly many times, but I didn't kill him. I tried to explain, but the look in their eyes told me that they had already determined that I was the culprit. What was even more terrifying was when Taylor appeared at the interrogation as a witness. I thought she would take my side, defend me against these absurd accusations, but the first thing Taylor said was, "Jack has changed. He has become obsessive and unable to control his behavior." Those words were like a knife stabbing straight into my heart. I looked at her, trying to search for the truth in her eyes, but all I saw was coldness and distance. Taylor had turned her back on me. Not only did she doubt me, but she was also willing to side with the enemy to protect herself. As if that weren't enough, Walter Fry, my best friend, showed up. Walter was a longtime colleague, someone I trusted, but instead of supporting me, he sided with Medicorp. Walter testified that I'd said I would do whatever it took to stop Michael Carter's manipulation. Those words were twisted into a way of making me look like an angry, murderous man. I was accused of murder. In that moment, I realized I had been 6.3 years. Not only Medicorp, but the people I trusted the most had betrayed me. Taylor, my wife, who I loved deeply, and Walter, my closest friend, were now witnesses against me. As I was led back to my cell, my mind was filled with questions. Why? How could they betray me like this? But the answers remained elusive. And worst of all, I realized that this was only the beginning. The first few days in prison were the darkest of my life. Every time the heavy steel door slammed shut, I felt trapped not only in this small space, but also in unspeakable pain and betrayal. I tried to piece together the puzzle, searching for a flaw in the conspiracy. And then, little by little, the truth began to emerge. Rumors spread like wildfire in the prison. I learned that Walter Fry had become Medicorp's legal counsel just a few months before my arrest. This was no coincidence. Walter knew my strengths and weaknesses, and now he was on the side of the enemy. Even more suspicious, large sums of money had been transferred to his account through foreign banks. A fact I learned from a whisper from another prisoner who had worked as an accountant for a Medicorp subsidiary. But what hurt me the most was not Walter, but Taylor. As I tried to make sense of her betrayal, I received a suspicious clue. A guard handed me an old newspaper with a small photo in the society section. In the photo, Taylor and Walter appeared together at a charity party, looking very intimate. The newspaper was dated just a few weeks before my arrest. I couldn't believe my eyes. The anger was overwhelming, but the pain was even greater. How could Taylor, someone I loved and trusted, stand with someone who betrayed me? How could she make me her enemy? From the fragments of information I gathered, I realized that this was not a simple conspiracy. Medicorp didn't just want to remove me from the lawsuit. They wanted to destroy everything I stood for. My career, my reputation, my family. They wanted to send a message. No one, not even the strongest, could stand against them. During an internal interview, my investigator, a designated attorney, even warned me, "Jack, you're not just fighting Medicorp. You're fighting a rigged system. Walter didn't just betray you for money. He may have been forced to, or he may have been protecting himself." I sat in my cell, night after night, repeating the same questions in my head. If Medicorp had the power to manipulate the entire legal system, would I have any chance of clearing my name? But every time I thought of Lucas, my son, the fire inside me burned. Lucas could not live with this humiliation. I could not let Medicorp win. One day, I received a letter. It was from Lucas. His short words brought tears to my eyes. "Dad, I trust you. I know you didn't do it. You're my hero, and I'm going to prove it to everyone." That letter was a turning point. It was a reminder that I wasn't fighting alone. I had to stand up. I had to find a way to turn the tables. Gradually, I began to observe my surroundings. In prison, I found an unlikely ally, Luther Smith, a former Special Forces officer wrongly imprisoned for a similar plot. Luther was unlike anyone I had ever met, shrewd, secretive, and experienced. He showed me how to survive in prison, but more than that, he taught me that every small step could be part of a larger plan. "I've seen people like Medicorp before," Luther said in a late-night chat. "They think money and power can wipe out all evil. But what they never expect is that when a person has nothing left to lose, he becomes their most dangerous enemy. Luther's words were like a kick in the gut. I had nothing to lose, but I had everything to gain. I began memorizing every detail of the investigation files, listening to every whisper in the prison, and formulating my own plan. Medicorp thought they had me trapped, but they had forgotten that I was someone who would never accept defeat. In prison, I learned to be quiet and observe. This place where justice was distorted was where I found unexpected truths. I realized that in the dark, sometimes you can't tell who is your friend and who is your enemy. But then, in this chaotic world, I met Luther Smith. Luther was a former military special forces soldier whom the prisoners called the Ghost. He always maintained a calm and cold demeanor that was frightening. Luther's sharp eyes seemed to see through everything, and I knew from the first time I met him that this was someone I needed to get along with. One evening in the prison yard, when everyone else was staying away, Luther suddenly came toward me. "Carter, I hear you're a lawyer," he said, his voice hoarse, but each word cut like a knife. "Do you know you're being set up?" I looked at him, trying to hide my surprise. "If you know something, then tell me," I replied, trying to sound calm. Luther sat down across from me, as if we were in a coffee shop rather than a prison yard full of watchful eyes. He told me that Medicorp not only manipulated the judicial system, but also had connections to powerful people in the government and the military. "I worked for people like them," Luther said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "They don't just want to destroy you, they want you to be a lesson to anyone who dares to stand up to them." I listened intently, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Luther not only knew about the conspiracy, he had an idea of how to get out. "We need to find evidence, but not from here. Outside, there are people working for you that you don't know about." He was talking about Lucas and Jackie. I didn't tell Luther about Lucas's letter, but in my heart, I knew my son was doing something to clear my name. "The thing is," Luther continued, "you can't just sit here and wait. You have to play your own game." I looked at Luther, my eyes filled with doubt. "And why are you helping me?" Luther smiled slightly, a mysterious smile. "Because you're not the only one Medicorp has set up. They destroyed me too. But I'm the type of person who, if I can't fight on the outside, I'll do it from the inside." From that day on, Luther and I began to communicate more. He showed me how to gather information in prison, how to gain people's trust without revealing too much. Luther helped me realize that, even in captivity, I could still build a network of allies. One day, Luther handed me a small piece of paper with a name and address written on it. "Give this to your son. This person is my former comrade, currently out there, and can help him." I didn't ask any more questions, only knowing that this was the first step in connecting the inside and outside worlds, to fight against Medicorp. After my conversation with Luther, I knew that my hope lay not only inside the prison, but also on the outside, where my son Lucas was fighting for me. The note Luther gave me contained the name and address of someone who could help Lucas, Max Ryan, an investigative journalist who had exposed many major scandals. I knew that if Lucas could find Max, we would have a chance against Medicorp. In prison, communicating with the outside world was not easy, but I learned how to find loopholes. With Luther's help, I smuggled a letter through a prisoner about to be released, who promised to deliver it to Lucas personally. In the letter, I reminded Lucas not to act alone, and to find Max. Outside, Lucas didn't wait. When he received my letter, he immediately tried to contact Max Ryan. Lucas wasn't alone. He had found a valuable ally, Jackie Birch, whom I knew only from Lucas's brief correspondence. Jackie was a young hacker whose older sister had died from Medicorp's poison. That loss had turned her into someone who was unafraid of any system, no matter how complex or dangerous. Lucas and Jackie began searching for the first clues. Medicorp, like all large corporations, believed that their security systems were impenetrable, but they had not expected Jackie's talent. One night, Jackie and Lucas sat in Jackie's family garage, which they had turned into a mini investigation center. Jackie's computer whirred to life, the screen flashing with lines of a code I could never understand. After hours of tinkering, Jackie suddenly shouted, "I'm in!" Before them was a massive trove of Medicorp emails. Jackie began digging through them and found some horrifying information. In a series of internal messages, Medicorp executives not only discussed hiding evidence of tainted drugs, but also mentioned me by name. One of the emails that made Lucas shudder was from Francis Arroyo, CEO of Medicorp, to Walter Fry, who used to be my best friend. Make sure Jack is neutralized. Use any means necessary, but do it cleanly. We can't let him expose any more secrets. Lucas clenched his fists, his eyes flashing with anger. They framed my dad, Lucas said, his voice shaking. Jackie put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll get this out. But first, we need more evidence. In the days that followed, Jackie and Lucas discovered a crucial detail. Medicorp had not only bribed judges, but had also manipulated the banking system to hide the illicit funds. A series of large transactions had been made through offshore accounts, and many of the transactions coincided with judges ruling in Medicorp's favor. We need stronger evidence, Jackie told Lucas. Something that can tie Walter and Medicorp to Judge Carter's murder. If we can prove that Walter was behind it, we can save your father. Meanwhile, Max Ryan also started to get involved. With his experience, Max approached the inside sources at Medicorp and discovered a series of mysterious deaths of employees who dared to stand up and denounce the corporation. It became increasingly clear Medicorp was a giant monster, not afraid to crush anyone who stood in its way. Even though we were separated by prison walls, I felt Lucas's every move through the clues Luther brought. One day, Luther gave me a small note from a contact. Lucas and Jackie have detected transactions from Medicorp to Walter's account. They are looking further. I smiled for the first time in weeks. My son was not only smart, he was stronger and more determined than I'd ever imagined. For the first time, I felt real hope, not for myself, but because Lucas would not let the truth be buried. At the end of this chapter, I knew that the fight was not over, but now I was no longer fighting alone. Inside the prison, Luther and I were preparing to make our first move. Outside, Lucas and Jackie were trying to break through Medicorp's walls of secrecy. I vowed that no one would escape justice. In prison, I slowly learned how to survive in an environment filled with cruelty and suspicion. But most importantly, I no longer lived just to survive. With Luther's help, I began to plan a comeback. Medicorp thought they had me down, but what they didn't know was that I was quietly rebuilding everything from the inside. Luther, with his special forces experience and underground network of contacts, became an indispensable companion. He not only taught me how to read other prisoners, but also helped me create a network of trust. People I had helped in prison by providing legal advice or settling small disputes now began to return the favor. They became my eyes and ears, helping me gather seemingly trivial but valuable pieces of information. One day, Luther gave me an important piece of information. Medicorp was trying to cover up the case by eliminating those involved. A high-ranking employee who had worked with Walter had disappeared, and rumors in prison said he had been dealt with before he could say anything. This made me understand that they weren't just setting me up. They were wiping out all traces. They won't let you off easy, Luther said. If you want to survive, you have to stay one step ahead of them. His words kept me thinking all night. I knew I couldn't just play defense. I had to go on the offensive. I had to find the evidence, and I had to do it before Medicorp could plug any holes. From the information Luther brought back, I knew Lucas and Jackie were getting closer to the truth. One day, Luther handed me a short letter from Lucas, in which my son wrote, "Dad, Jackie found the hotel security camera footage from the night Judge Carter was murdered. Walter was there. They're trying to clean it up, but we'll get it back. This video is the key I need. Medicorp has tried everything to incriminate me, but this video could be used as evidence against them." Luther and I began to formulate a plan. We needed to do two things at once: keep me safe in prison and make sure Lucas had enough time to work on the outside. Luther used his network to get the word out, asking Max Ryan to publicize some of the information Lucas and Jackie had found. That way we would force Medicorp to divert its attention from focusing solely on silencing me. I also began preparing for the appeal. I couldn't wait for justice to come to me. I had to create it. I reviewed every document, every testimony used against me, and every flaw in the prosecution's argument. With Luther's help, I discovered that several key witnesses in my case, including Taylor, had received money from a bank account associated with Medicorp. "You can use this against them," Luther said. "But you have to be careful. If you expose it too soon, they will cover it up before you can bring it to court." Everything began to make sense. I wasn't just being framed. I was a pawn in a much larger game. But I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Medicorp, Walter, or even Taylor win. I was going to expose them all. Outside, Lucas and Jackie continued to fight the clock. They knew that each day that passed meant Medicorp was one day closer to wiping out all traces. Jackie had found video from the hotel's security cameras, a crucial piece of evidence that could prove Walter Fry was at the scene the night Judge Carter was murdered. But the video was heavily encrypted, and time was not on their side. Medicorp didn't just try to delete it, Jackie told Lucas. They put a tracking program in place. If we're not careful, they'll know what we're doing. We have no choice, Lucas replied, his eyes full of determination. Dad needs this video. Without it, it's all over. Jackie stared at her computer screen, the lines of code maze-like. After hours, she finally cracked the code. The image appeared. Walter Fry entered the hotel lobby at 10:13 p.m., holding a large package. About 10 minutes later, he left, empty-handed. Lucas stared at the screen, his heart pounding. That's him. That package. It must be the murder weapon. That's not all, Jackie said, rewinding the video. They saw Walter talking to someone else, a man dressed as a hotel manager. We need to find out who he is, she said. Lucas and Jackie knew they couldn't go it alone. They needed Max Ryan, the investigative journalist their father had assigned. Max was the only one who could make the video public without being immediately silenced by Medicorp. They meet Max at a small suburban coffee shop. Lucas gives Max the USB drive containing the video and tells him everything they've discovered: shady financial dealings, a list of judges who took bribes, and Walter Fry's direct involvement in Judge Carter's murder. Max flipped through the documents Lucas and Jackie had brought, his eyes as sharp as knives. Do you realize that Medicorp won't sit idly by if I go public with this? This isn't just a murder case. It's a conspiracy that runs deep throughout the legal system. That's why we need you, Lucas said. My dad's running out of time. If Medicorp succeeds in shutting this down, they'll not only ruin him, but people like Jackie and me won't be safe either. Max nodded, stuffing the USB into his pocket. Okay, I'll start with the video, but you better be ready. They won't let you off easy. In prison, I got word from Luther that the video had reached Max Ryan. Lucas and Jackie did a great job, Luther said, gripping my shoulders. But now, Medicorp is more dangerous than ever. They will seek revenge. I knew it. And I also knew that the upcoming appeals hearing would be my only chance to expose it all. Luther and I prepared the documents necessary to prove Medicorp's settlement in the case. One of the prisoners, a former accountant for Medicorp, volunteered to testify, revealing the shady financial transactions he had handled. Meanwhile, outside, Max published the video in a major newspaper article. The truth about Walter's presence at the hotel caused a stir. Medicorp immediately fired back, calling the video fake and accusing Max Ryan and his team of running a smear campaign. But what Medicorp didn't expect was that Lucas and Jackie had another card up their sleeve. They found an internal email chain in Jackie's hacked data, in which Walter admitted to setting me up and described in detail how he had arranged everything to make me look like the culprit. The most surprising thing happened when Taylor, my cheating wife, appeared before the media. Under pressure from public opinion and increasingly clear evidence, she decided to turn her back on Walter. In an interview, Taylor confessed that Walter forced her to testify against me by threatening to ruin her career and life. Jack didn't kill Michael Carter, Taylor said, her voice shaking. Walter lied to me. I was wrong to trust him, but now I want to make it right. Taylor's confession was a fatal blow to Walter and Medicorp. It not only opened the door to my vindication, but also pushed Walter into the dark corners of public and legal opinion. The day of the appeal hearing finally arrived. I walked into the courtroom, my hands cuffed, my dark orange prison jumpsuit standing out against the crowd of lawyers in their shiny black suits. The eyes of the audience were fixed on me, filled with disbelief and sometimes contempt. But I didn't care. I knew I was innocent, and today, the truth would be revealed. Beside me sat Robbie, my newly appointed attorney, young but sharp and energetic. He had studied every detail of my case file and promised not to let any of my slanderous accusations escape his defense. But what reassured me most was that outside the courtroom, Lucas, Jackie, and Max Ryan held our strongest cards, irrefutable evidence of Medicorp and Walter Fry's conspiracy. The trial began, with the prosecutors giving a blistering speech, trying to paint me as a vengeful, obsessed with the case, who would kill to achieve his goal. They presented false testimony from witnesses, including my wife Taylor. But what shocked me was the brazenness of Walter Fry when he appeared as the key witness. Walter took the stand, confident and calm, as if he had everything under control. He claimed that I had repeatedly threatened to harm Judge Carter and that I had become uncontrollable because of the failure of the Medicorp lawsuit. His lies made me so angry that I had to clench my fist to keep my composure. But when Robbie took the stand, things began to change. He presented a series of emails from Medicorp, emails that Jackie and Lucas had found, that showed Walter had received large sums of money from Medicorp to settle the case. One of the emails even stated, "Walter, make sure Jack is tied up. All evidence points to him, and don't let us have any contact with him." The courtroom fell dead silent. Walter looked confused, but he quickly dismissed it. "This is just a false accusation by the defense," he said, trying to keep his voice even. But Robbie didn't stop there. He turned to the prosecutor and asked, "If this is false evidence, why didn't you ask for an investigation into the source of this money? We traced it and found that it all came from Medicorp bank accounts." The prosecutor was stumped. Apparently, they didn't expect us to present such strong evidence. With Walter on the ropes, Robbie continued to push his case. He showed the hotel security camera footage, an image of Walter entering the hotel lobby with a large package on the night of the murder. The video not only undermined the prosecutor's case, but also placed Walter directly under suspicion. The biggest blow came when Taylor was called to the witness stand. She hesitated at first, her eyes searching me for something. But then, under pressure from the evidence Robbie presented, she was forced to admit that Walter had forced her to testify against me. "Walter threatened me," Taylor said, her voice shaking. "He said if I didn't do it, he would destroy my career and possibly Lucas's." The courtroom erupted in cheers at her confession. That was the moment I knew the tables had turned. Medicorp and Walter had painted themselves into a dark corner. The trial continued with a tense atmosphere. Taylor's confession had completely undermined the prosecution's case, but we knew it was not enough to bring down Walter and Medicorp. They would not give up their power and influence easily. Robbie continued his presentation by introducing a new witness, an unlikely one, a former Medicorp accountant whom Luther and I had persuaded to testify. When this man took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. He began by confirming that he had worked in Medicorp's senior finance department, but left the company after discovering shady dealings. Medicorp has a hidden financial system for bribing judges and high-ranking officials, he said, his voice full of finality. They use offshore bank accounts to move money. I was the one who handled some of the transactions related to the Jack Carter case. Those funds were sent to Walter Fry and several others. The prosecution tried to counter that the witness was unreliable because of his history of leaving work abruptly, but Robbie was prepared. He presented a series of documents from the witness himself, including transaction receipts and internal emails that proved everything he said was true. The trial climaxed when Max Ryan came forward with another shocking revelation. During the investigation, Max's team discovered that Medicorp had gone beyond bribery and settlements, and had also been involved in a string of murders that were falsely labeled as accidents. One of the victims was a former employee who had been preparing to testify against Medicorp before being found drowned in a bathtub. Medicorp is more than just a corrupt corporation, Max said, his voice hard as he handed over investigative documents. They are a criminal organization, and Walter Fry was their primary tool in orchestrating and covering up these crimes. As the evidence piled up, Walter, who had always maintained a confident demeanor, finally broke down. He knew there was no way back. In a moment of surprise, he turned to his lawyer and whispered something. A few minutes later, Walter's lawyer stood up and announced that his client wanted to make a deal. Walter agreed to testify against Medicorp in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony was a fatal blow to the corporation. He admitted that Medicorp had ordered Judge Carter's murder and had set up the whole thing to frame me. "They told me I had to do it," Walter said, his voice cracking. "They said if I didn't cooperate, my family and I wouldn't be safe." Although Walter's words were full of justification, that did not lessen their weight. Those in the courtroom looked at him with contempt, realizing that he was only trying to save himself. With Walter's testimony, along with the evidence from Lucas, Jackie, Max, and the accounting witness, my case was completely overturned. The judge decided to immediately drop all charges against me and ordered a full investigation into Medicorp and its associates. As I walked out of the courtroom, my handcuffs were removed and I felt free. But that was not the end. Medicorp's collapse was only the beginning. Top executives, including Medicorp CEO Francis Arroyo, were arrested shortly thereafter. The company's assets were frozen, and the nation was outraged as the shocking truth about Medicorp was revealed. Taylor, despite her efforts to make amends, still faces legal consequences for her role in the original plot. But I am no longer angry with her. Her betrayal taught me that sometimes the closest people can become strangers. The day I left the courtroom, Lucas and Jackie were waiting outside. Lucas rushed to hug me, his voice choked up. "I told you, Dad, you're innocent." I looked at my son, unable to hide my emotion. Jackie, standing next to me, just smiled. She knew this was just the beginning of a bigger battle. As the prison doors closed behind me, I felt like I had just emerged from a lifelong battle. The bright sunlight outside seemed to remind me that freedom is not just about escaping the four walls of a prison, but also about finding yourself again after the inevitable loss. Medicorp collapsed, and its top executives were arrested and prosecuted. Francis Arroyo, Medicorp's CEO, was sentenced to life in prison for murder, bribery, and corruption. Walter Fry, who had been my best friend, was sentenced to 25 years for his role in the conspiracy. But their collapse was not the only thing I had to deal with. Taylor, my wife, who was everything to me, is now a shadow of a memory. After her confession in court, she was convicted of complicity and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Although she tried to make amends, the gap between us was too great to bridge. I am no longer angry with her, but I no longer feel any love or attachment. My son Lucas refused to see his mother after the trial. He has matured faster than I ever expected, and in his eyes, I see a determination that I had when I was young. But I know that what Lucas has been through will forever be imprinted on his soul. After being cleared, I spent several weeks resting and thinking about what had happened. Every day, I felt the weight of the loss. My family was broken, my reputation was restored, but my faith in the legal system I had once defended was shattered. Yet, alongside the pain, I also found hope. Lucas and Jackie, two young but passionate people, showed me that the truth always has a way to prevail, even when everything seems to be against it. Lucas often said to me, "Dad, we can't stop here. You fought for justice, and I want to continue that path." My son's words gave me strength. I decided not to let my loss be in vain. With the support of Max Ryan and several other allies, I founded the Justice Reform Initiative, an organization dedicated to investigating and exposing corruption in the legal system. This was not only a way for me to make amends, but also a commitment to people like Gail Sosa, Jackie, and all the victims of Medicorp that the truth would always be protected. Lucas became my right-hand man. With his technical talent and determination, he helped the organization find clues that no one else could. Jackie also joined as a cybersecurity expert, using her skills to fight against the systems of power she once hated. A year after my release, I stood in front of the organization's new offices, looking at the young faces of the staff, people who believed in the ideals of justice. I felt proud, but also sad. I knew I'd lost a lot: a family, old friends, and faith in a part of the world I had loved. But what I had gained was no small thing. The Justice Reform Initiative is more than just my organization. It is a symbol for all those who have been trampled by injustice, an affirmation that justice is not the prerogative of those with money and power. I know the road ahead will not be easy, but for the first time in years, I feel like I have found true meaning in life. One evening, sitting next to Lucas, I asked, "Do you regret getting involved in all this?" Lucas smiled, his eyes shining. "No, Dad. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. You taught me that the truth is always worth fighting for, and I will never forget that." Lucas's words made me understand that no matter how much I lost, there was a reason to keep going. Pain and victory, loss and recovery, all of these things make up my journey, and I will never let what I have won be lost again. A year after the Justice Reform Initiative launched, I stood in the organization's offices, looking out the glass windows at the bustling city below. The lights of the skyscrapers glittered in the darkness, but to me, each light was a reminder. Justice is never taken for granted. We have accomplished a lot. 37 people who were wrongly convicted have been released. Dozens of corruption cases involving large corporations and the justice system have been exposed. But I know this is just the beginning. Lucas walked in, holding the familiar laptop. "Dad, Jackie just sent me a new file." It's a string of shady transactions from another pharmaceutical company. The exact same pattern as Medicorp. We can dig deeper? I nodded, smiling at my son. We will continue, Lucas. But this time, they won't have the same chance. Young people like Lucas and Jackie are a new flame, bringing hope to those who have been trampled by the system of power. I am getting older, the scars of the past are still there, but I am not tired. If there is anything I have learned in my life, it is that justice is not a destination. It is a journey, a never-ending battle. Lucas, Jackie, and the young people on my team are preparing for another fight. I know that when I'm no longer here, they will continue to protect the values we built. I walked to my desk and looked at an old photo of my family, a memory from the days when things were better. Taylor, though no longer with me, was part of this journey. She made mistakes, but I hope that wherever she is, she understands that this fight is not about an individual, but about the values that I and she believed in. As I walked out of the office, I heard Lucas say to Jackie, "Dad never gets a break, does he?" Jackie laughed. "That's why we're here." I smiled, walking into the yellow light of the hallway. The Justice Reform Initiative is not just my story. It is the story of everyone who believes that justice is worth fighting for, not just today, but tomorrow.